The rain pounded against the cracked plastic shelter as Beth Williams pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders. 3 weeks sleeping in doorways and park benches had left her exhausted, but the small bus stop bench was the only dry spot she could find tonight. Her stomach cramped with hunger, and her wet sneakers squelched with every movement. That's when she saw the little girl. No older than 6, the child sat alone on the other end of the bench, swinging her legs and humming softly. Her blonde hair was neatly braided, and she wore a bright red raincoat that looked expensive. Beth glanced around, searching for parents or guardians, but the street was empty except for the steady stream of rainwater rushing down the gutters. "Where are your parents, sweetheart?" Beth asked gently, scooting closer. The little girl looked up with startling blue eyes. "Mrs. Patterson is inside the pharmacy getting her medicine. She takes a long time because her legs hurt." Beth nodded, relieved someone was responsible for this child. She was about to lean back when the girl spoke again. "Are you sad?" The simple question caught Beth off guard. What makes you ask that?" "Your eyes look like mine did when I lived with the Johnson family. They were mean to me, so I cried a lot." The child tilted her head thoughtfully. "You look like you need someone to be nice to you." Beth's throat tightened. When was the last time someone had shown her genuine concern? "What's your name, honey?" "Sophie Carter." "What's yours?" "Beth Williams." Sophie nodded seriously, as if filing away this important information. "Beth, do you have a house?" "Not right now, no." "Oh." Sophie was quiet for a moment, then brightened. "I live with Mrs. Patterson, but she's really old and gets confused sometimes. She can't play games or read stories very good because her eyes are bad." Through the pharmacy window, Beth could see an elderly woman with a walker speaking to the pharmacist. The woman looked frail, her white hair thin and her movements slow. "You know what, Beth?" Sophie said suddenly, turning to face her completely. "You need a home, and I need a mommy. Mrs. Patterson tries real hard, but she's more like a grandma. She forgets to pack my lunch sometimes, and she can't help me with homework because she can't see the letters good." Beth stared at this remarkable child who spoke with wisdom far beyond her years. "Sophie, I don't think it works that way." "Why not?" Sophie interrupted. "You seem nice, and you're not scary like some of the other grown-ups I've lived with. You asked about my parents right away, which means you care about kids being safe." The pharmacy door chimed, and Mrs. Patterson emerged slowly, gripping her walker with one hand and a white paper bag with the other. She squinted in their direction. "Sophie, is that you, dear?" "Yes, Mrs. Patterson. This is my new friend Beth. She doesn't have a house right now." The elderly woman approached cautiously, her pale green eyes kind but concerned. "Hello, dear. I'm Margaret Patterson." She studied Beth's worn clothing and tired appearance. "Are you all right?" Beth stood quickly, not wanting to alarm this woman who was clearly struggling herself. "I'm fine. Sophie was just being friendly while you were inside." "She's really nice, Mrs. Patterson," Sophie chimed in. "And she needs help just like we do." Margaret Patterson's expression softened. Despite her own obvious challenges, Beth could see compassion in the older woman's face. "Well, any friend of Sophie's, where are you staying tonight, dear?" Beth hesitated. She'd learned not to trust easily after 3 weeks on the streets, but something about this unlikely pair felt different. "I'm not sure yet. I'll find somewhere." "In this weather?" Mrs. Patterson shook her head firmly. "Nonsense. We have a perfectly good couch, don't we, Sophie?" Sophie clapped her hands together. "Yes. And Beth could help you with the heavy stuff, Mrs. Patterson. And maybe she could read me bedtime stories because she probably has good eyes." Beth felt tears threatening. "I couldn't impose." "You're not imposing," Mrs. Patterson said firmly, though Beth noticed how she gripped her walker for support. "Sophie's right. We all need help sometimes. The good Lord puts people in our path for a reason." As if to emphasize the point, a flash of lightning illuminated the dark street, followed immediately by a crash of thunder. The rain began falling even harder. "Please, Beth," Sophie asked, slipping her small hand into Beth's cold one. "I have a really good feeling about this." Beth looked down at the earnest little face, then at Mrs. Patterson, who was nodding encouragingly despite the obvious effort it took for her to stand. Something in her chest loosened for the first time in weeks. "Are you sure?" she asked quietly. "Absolutely certain," Mrs. Patterson replied. "Sophie has excellent instincts about people. Never been wrong yet." Sophie beamed. "This is going to be the best thing ever. You'll see, Beth. Sometimes when you really need something, it just shows up exactly when you need it most." As they made their way slowly down the sidewalk together, Mrs. Patterson with her walker, Sophie skipping between them, and Beth carrying the pharmacy bag, Beth wondered if maybe, just maybe, this extraordinary little girl might be right. What kind of person walks away when a child asks for help, even in the most unexpected way? Share your thoughts below and subscribe to see how this unlikely family's story unfolds. The small apartment building came into view, its yellow brick exterior cheerful even in the storm. For the first time in weeks, Beth was heading toward shelter not just for her body, but possibly for her heart. The apartment was small but clean, with floral curtains and furniture that had seen better decades. Beth found herself on a navy blue couch with a handmade Afghan, holding a cup of hot tea while Sophie curled up beside her, chattering away about her day. Mrs. Patterson makes the best grilled cheese, but she forgets sometimes and they get really black on the bottom, Sophie explained matter-of-factly. "I don't tell her because it makes us sad when she messes up." From the kitchen came the sounds of Mrs. Patterson moving slowly around, preparing what she insisted would be a proper dinner. Every few minutes, Beth could hear her talking to herself, trying to remember where she'd put things. "Sophie," Beth said gently, "how long have you been living here?" "Since February. Before that, I was with the Johnsons for 4 months, but Mr. Johnson got really mad when I spilled juice on his carpet. Before that was the Miller family, but they decided they wanted a baby instead of a big kid like me." Beth's heart ached. "How many families have you lived with?" Sophie counted on her fingers. 7, I think. Maybe 8. I lose track sometimes." She shrugged as if this was perfectly normal. "Linda, that's my social worker. She says some families just aren't the right fit. Like trying on shoes that are too big or too small. And Mrs. Patterson is the right fit." "Kind of." Sophie's expression grew thoughtful. "She's really nice and she loves me a lot. She tells me stories about when she was little, and she lets me help her water her plants. But what, sweetheart?" She's getting more confused. "Last week she forgot to pick me up from school, and I had to wait until the principal called her. And sometimes she forgets to take her medicine, so I have to remind her." Sophie's voice dropped to a whisper. "I heard her talking to Linda on the phone yesterday. She said she doesn't know how much longer she can take care of me properly." Beth set down her teacup. "What did Linda say?" "That they are looking for another family for me to try. But I don't want to go somewhere new again, Beth. I'm tired of packing my suitcase and meeting new people who might not like me." Mrs. Patterson appeared in the doorway, leaning heavily on her walker. "Dinner's ready, girls. Just soup and sandwiches, I'm afraid." During dinner, Beth observed the dynamic between Sophie and Mrs. Patterson more closely. The little girl instinctively helped in small ways, steadying the older woman's hand when she reached for the salt, gently reminding her which pills to take with food, refilling her water glass without being asked. "Sophie tells me you've been having a rough time lately," Mrs. Patterson said to Beth between spoonfuls of tomato soup. Beth nodded. "My mother passed away 6 months ago. Cancer. The medical bills and funeral costs used up all our savings, and I couldn't keep up with rent on just my income from the bookstore. When the store closed down, I lost my job and my apartment in the same week." "Oh, you poor day." Mrs. Patterson reached across and patted Beth's hand. "I lost my Harold 3 years ago. The loneliness is almost harder than the financial struggles." "Mrs. Patterson gets lonely too," Sophie added. "That's why she talks to the plants. She says they are good listeners." They all laughed, and Beth felt something she hadn't experienced in months, a sense of belonging somewhere. After dinner, while Mrs. Patterson dozed in her recliner, Sophie showed Beth around the small apartment. There was Mrs. Patterson's room with its hospital bed and medical equipment, a tiny bathroom with grab bars and a shower chair, and Sophie's room. The child's bedroom was clearly temporary. A single bed with plain sheets, a small dresser, and a suitcase in the corner that was never fully unpacked. I learned not to put all my stuff away, Sophie explained matter-of-factly. It's easier when it's time to leave. Beth knelt down to Sophie's level. Sweetheart, what if there was a way for you to stay here with Mrs. Patterson, but with someone to help take care of both of you? Sophie's eyes widened. You mean like you could stay too? I don't know if it's possible, but maybe we could figure something out. I could help Mrs. Patterson with things that are hard for her, and I could help take care of you. Really? You would want to do that? Sophie, I've never met anyone as brave and kind as you. Any family would be lucky to have you. Sophie threw her arms around Beth's neck. I knew you were the right person when I saw you at the bus stop. I just knew it. From the living room, they heard Mrs. Patterson call out softly. When they returned, she was sitting up in her chair, looking more alert. Girls, I need to be honest about something, she said. I got a call from Linda Thompson today. She's coming tomorrow for Sophie's monthly visit, and she's going to discuss moving Sophie to a new placement. My doctor told her I've been having more confused episodes, and they are worried about Sophie's safety. Sophie's face fell. But I don't want to leave. This is the closest thing to home I've had. Mrs. Patterson's eyes filled with tears. I don't want you to leave either, sweetheart. But they are right, I can't take care of you the way you deserve. Beth looked between them, seeing the love and the heartbreak. Mrs. Patterson, what if I stayed and helped? I could be like a living companion for both of you. But Day, I can barely afford to feed Sophie and myself. I couldn't pay you anything. I don't need money right now. I need a place to stay and people to care about. We could all help each other. Mrs. Patterson studied Beth carefully. Are you sure about this? Taking on an old woman with failing health and a child who's been through more than any little one should. Beth looked at Sophie, who was watching her with hopeful eyes. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Then we'd better clean up this place before Linda gets here tomorrow, Mrs. Patterson said with the first real smile Beth had seen from her. We need to show her that Sophie has a real home here, with people who love her. As they began straightening up together, Beth realized that sometimes the most important decisions in life happen in the smallest moments. A conversation at a bus stop, a shared meal, a child's simple faith that good things can happen. Tomorrow would bring challenges, but tonight they were a family. Beth woke up on the couch to the smell of pancakes and the sound of Sophie giggling in the kitchen. Sunlight streamed through the floral curtains, and for a moment, she forgot about the uncertainty ahead. Good morning, sleepyhead, Sophie called out cheerfully. Mrs. Patterson is making breakfast, but I'm helping because she can't flip them very good anymore. Beth found them at the stove, Mrs. Patterson gripping the spatula with both hands while Sophie stood on a chair beside her, ready to catch any pancakes that might go flying. Morning, dear, Mrs. Patterson said. I hope you slept well. That old couch isn't the most comfortable thing. It was perfect, Beth replied honestly. After weeks on park benches, the soft cushions had felt luxurious. Linda will be here at 10, Mrs. Patterson continued, carefully sliding a golden pancake onto a plate. Sophie, why don't you tell Beth what we discussed? Sophie turned around, her face serious. We decided that if Linda thinks this could work, you staying here with us, then we want to try it. But we have to be honest about everything. Over breakfast, they planned their approach. Mrs. Patterson would explain her health challenges, but emphasize how Beth's presence could provide the stability Sophie needed. Beth would be honest about her situation while showing her commitment to both of them. What if she says no? Sophie asked quietly. Then we'll figure out another way, Beth said firmly. Good people don't give up on each other. At exactly 10 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. Linda Thompson was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and an efficient manner. She greeted Sophie with genuine warmth before turning her attention to Beth. Mrs. Patterson mentioned you had a visitor, Linda said, her tone professional but not unfriendly. This is Beth Williams, Mrs. Patterson said. She's the young woman I told you about. That afternoon, Beth walked to the local grocery store to pick up ingredients for a celebration dinner. As she walked down the sidewalk, she marveled at how quickly life could change. Yesterday morning, she'd been sleeping on a bench with no hope. Today, She was planning a meal for her new family. The store clerk, a middle-aged man named Robert, was friendly as he rang up her purchases. "Having a dinner party?" he asked, noticing the ingredients for Sophie's favorite spaghetti and meatballs. "Something like that," Beth smiled. "A new beginning celebration." "Those are the best kind," Robert said, handing her the receipt. "Good luck with whatever you're starting fresh." As Beth walked home, and it felt good to think of it as home, she reflected on Linda's parting words. Sometimes the most unconventional families work the best. They are built on choice rather than obligation. Tonight, they would celebrate choosing each other. 2 weeks into their trial arrangement, Beth discovered that Mrs. Patterson had been right about one thing. Sophie had excellent instincts about people. The little girl seemed to attract kindness wherever they went, and her infectious optimism was already changing their small corner of the world. Their first stop was Riverside Diner, a cheerful place 6 blocks from the apartment where Mrs. Patterson said they served the best coffee in Portland. Beth had hoped to find part-time work, and Sophie had insisted they should try there first. "The owner is really nice," Sophie explained as they walked hand-in-hand down the sidewalk. "He always gives me extra crackers when we come in." The diner was busy with the morning rush, but the atmosphere was warm and welcoming. Red vinyl booths lined the windows, and the walls were covered with local art and photographs of regular customers. Behind the counter, a stocky man with graying hair and kind eyes was expediting orders with practiced efficiency. "Sophie," he called out when he spotted them. "Where's Mrs. Patterson today?" "She's resting at home. This is Beth. She's living with us now and helping take care of me and Mrs. Patterson." The man wiped his hands on his apron and came around the counter. "Frank Rodriguez," he said, extending his hand to Beth. "Any friend of Sophie and Margaret is welcome here." "Beth Williams. Sophie thought you might be hiring." Frank's expression grew thoughtful. "What kind of experience do you have?" "Retail and customer service mostly, but I learn fast and I'm reliable." "The breakfast rush is our busiest time," Frank said, glancing around the bustling diner. "Can you handle fast-paced work?" "I can handle anything if it means providing for my family," Beth replied, surprising herself with how naturally the word family came out. Frank smiled. "I like that attitude. Can you start tomorrow morning?" 6 to 2 shift, 4 days a week to start. Beth felt a rush of relief and gratitude. "Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much." "Don't thank me yet. Wait until you've survived your first Saturday morning rush," Frank laughed. "Sophie, you want your usual hot chocolate while I show Beth around." As Frank gave Beth a quick tour of the kitchen and explained the basics, she noticed how the staff interacted with each other and the customers. This wasn't just a job for these people. It was a community hub. "Most of our regulars have been coming here for years," Frank explained. "We know their orders, their families, their stories. It's like an extended family." Their first regular customer to meet Beth was Helen Murphy, a retired teacher in her 70s who came in every Tuesday and Thursday for coffee and oatmeal. "So you're the young woman who's helping Margaret," Helen said warmly. "That's wonderful. Margaret's been such a blessing to so many people over the years, volunteering at the food bank, visiting shut-ins at church. It's about time someone took care of her." "She and Sophie are taking care of me too," Beth replied. "We're helping each other." "That's how the best relationships work," Helen nodded approvingly. "You know, I still have connections at the school district if you ever want to get back into education. I remember Margaret mentioning you have a teaching degree." Beth's heart jumped. "Really? I'd love to explore that possibility eventually." "Here's my card," Helen said, writing her phone number on the back of a business card. "Call me in a few months when you're settled. There are always substitute positions opening up." Over the following days, Beth met more of the diner's regular customers, each of whom seemed to know about Sophie and Mrs. Patterson's situation. There was Dr. James Mitchell, a semi-retired lawyer who offered legal advice over his morning eggs. Sarah Thompson, no relation to Linda, a nurse who provided informal health consultations. And Tom Bradley, a handyman who insisted on checking Mrs. Patterson's apartment for safety issues free of charge. "This community takes care of its own," Frank explained to Beth during a quiet afternoon shift. "Margaret and Sophie became everyone's adopted family when they started coming in together. Now you're part of that too." At home, the arrangement was working better than any of them had dared hope. Beth's presence allowed Mrs. Patterson to maintain her independence while ensuring Sophie's needs were met. They developed routines that played to everyone's strengths. Mornings started with Beth helping Sophie get ready for school, while Mrs. Patterson prepared her own medications with the organizational system they'd created together. Beth would walk Sophie to school, then head to the diner for her shift. Mrs. Patterson spent her mornings tending to her plants and reading, activities that kept her mind sharp and gave her purpose. Afternoons were family time. Beth would pick up Sophie from school, and they'd return home to help Mrs. Patterson with any errands or housework. Sophie did her homework at the kitchen table while Beth prepared dinner, and Mrs. Patterson would help by reading spelling words or listening to Sophie practice reading aloud. Evenings were the best part. They'd watch television together, play simple card games, or Sophie would put on impromptu performances of songs she'd learned at school. Mrs. Patterson would tell stories about her childhood, and Beth would read to Sophie from the library books they checked out weekly. "You know what I realized?" Sophie said one evening as Beth was tucking her into bed. "What's that?" "I used to think families had to look a certain way, like a mom and dad and kids all the same age. But we're a family, and we don't look like anything I've seen before." "Does that bother you?" "No," Sophie said firmly. "I like our family better. We all chose each other on purpose, and we all take care of each other. In the other families, it felt like they were taking care of me because they had to. Hey, it feels like you want to." The next day brought Linda Thompson for her bi-weekly check-in. She spent an hour observing their interactions, checking Sophie's school progress, and reviewing Mrs. Patterson's medical logs. "I have to say, I'm impressed," Linda told them as she prepared to leave. "Sophie's teacher reports she's more focused in class and seems happier overall. Mrs. Patterson, your health metrics are stable, and you seem more energetic. And Beth, you've clearly found your footing here." "It feels like home," Beth said simply. "That's exactly what Sophie needs," Linda replied. "I'll recommend to my supervisor that we extend this arrangement beyond the initial 3-month trial period." After Linda left, they celebrated with ice cream sundaes, a new tradition Sophie had insisted upon for good news. "What should we do next?" Sophie asked, chocolate sauce on her chin. "Next?" Mrs. Patterson asked. "Well, we're a real family now, right? So what do real families do?" Beth and Mrs. Patterson exchanged amused glances. "What do you think they do?" Beth asked. "They make plans together. Like maybe we could get a pet, or plan a vacation, or... Sophie's eyes lit up. "We could have a garden. Mrs. Patterson knows about plants, and I could learn, and Beth could help us build raised beds so Mrs. Patterson doesn't have to bend over." "That sounds like a wonderful project for spring," Mrs. Patterson said warmly. As they planned their potential garden, Beth marveled at how Sophie had taught them all something important. Families aren't about biology or tradition. They are about people who choose to love and support each other, day after day, through ordinary moments and extraordinary challenges. What would you do if a child changed your entire perspective on what family means? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more heartwarming stories of unexpected connections. 3 weeks after Linda's positive evaluation, Beth was beginning to feel like their little family had found its rhythm. She'd learned Mrs. Patterson's medication schedule by heart, Sophie's homework routine was second nature, and the diner felt like her second home. But she hadn't yet shared the full story of how she'd ended up homeless, and she could sense both Sophie and Mrs. Patterson giving her space to open up when she was ready. That opportunity came on a rainy Saturday evening when Sophie was having trouble sleeping. Beth found her sitting by her bedroom window, watching the raindrops race down the glass. "Can't sleep, sweetheart." "The rain makes me think about sad things sometimes," Sophie said quietly. "Like the night my first foster dad brought me back to Linda's office because I cried too much." Beth sat on the edge of Sophie's bed. "Do you want to talk about it?" "I was only 4 then. I didn't understand why my real mommy couldn't take care of me anymore, and I just wanted to go home. But there wasn't a home to go back to." Sophie turned from the window. "Mrs. Patterson told me you lost your mommy too. Were you sad like me?" Beth's throat tightened. She'd been avoiding this conversation, but Sophie deserved honesty. "Very sad. But I was grown up when it happened, so it was different. What was she like? My mom she was a lot like you, actually. She saw the good in everyone and always believed things would work out okay, even when they looked impossible. Sophie climbed under her covers and patted the space beside her. Will you tell me more? Beth settled next to her, and for the first time in months, she let herself remember the good parts instead of just the painful ending. Her name was Carol, and she worked as a librarian. She used to say that books were magic because they could take you anywhere and introduce you to people who became your friends. When I was your age, she would read to me every night, just like I read to you. What happened to her? She got very sick. Cancer. For 2 years, we fought it together, doctors, treatments, surgeries. She was so brave, Sophie. Even when she was scared, she would smile and tell me everything would be okay. From the doorway came a soft knock. Mrs. Patterson appeared with her walker, wearing her pink bathrobe. I heard voices. Is everything all right? Beth is telling me about her mommy, Sophie said, making room for Mrs. Patterson to sit in the bedside chair. Mrs. Patterson settled herself carefully. I'd like to hear too, if you don't mind sharing. Beth continued, feeling safer with both of them listening. The last 6 months were really hard. Mom couldn't work anymore, and I took leave from my job to take care of her. We used up all our savings paying for treatments that insurance wouldn't cover. That must have been scary, Sophie said softly. It was. But Mom kept saying that money was just money, and the important thing was the time we had together. She was right about that. Some of my best memories with her are from those last months, watching old movies together, talking about everything and nothing, her teaching me how to make her famous chocolate chip cookies. Did she know she was going to die? Sophie asked. Beth nodded. Toward the end, yes. And she worried about what would happen to me. She made me promise I wouldn't give up on my dreams of working with children, and that I'd remember how much she loved me. Then what happened? Mrs. Patterson asked gently. After she died, the bills kept coming. Funeral costs, final medical bills, things insurance didn't cover. I tried to manage everything, but I'd been out of work for 6 months. When I went back to the bookstore, they'd had to hire someone else. The manager felt terrible, but they couldn't afford 2 full-time employees. So you lost your job and your apartment? Sophie said. Within the same week. I had enough savings left for about 2 weeks in a motel, but after that... Beth shrugged. I ended up sleeping in my car until someone broke into it and stole everything I had left. Sophie reached over and took Beth's hand. That's when you were at the bus stop. That's when I was at the bus stop, Beth agreed, feeling like I'd lost everything that mattered. But you didn't lose everything, Sophie said firmly. You still had your mom's love, and your promise to her, and your good heart that made you worry about a little girl sitting alone in the rain. Mrs. Patterson wiped her eyes. Sophie's right, dear. You've lost a lot, but you haven't lost who you are. I was starting to wonder about that, Beth admitted. After sleeping outside for weeks, I felt like I was disappearing. Like maybe I wasn't the person my mom thought I was. But then you found us, Sophie said. And we found you. And now we're all taking care of each other, just like your mommy would have wanted. The simple truth of it hit Beth like a warm wave. Her mother would have loved Sophie's spirit and Mrs. Patterson's gentle wisdom. She would have been proud of Beth for choosing to help them instead of wallowing in her own problems. You know what I think? Mrs. Patterson said thoughtfully. I think your mother sent you to us. Harold used to say that love doesn't end when someone dies. It just finds new ways to show up. The next morning, Beth woke to find Sophie making breakfast with unusual determination. She'd managed to toast bread without burning it and had arranged orange slices in a flower pattern on the plate. What's all this? Beth asked. I wanted to make you breakfast because you were sad last night. In some of my foster homes, people made me special food when I was sad, and it always helped a little. Mrs. Patterson emerged from her room, moving more slowly than usual. I didn't sleep well, she admitted. My arthritis is acting up with this weather change. Beth noticed the signs she'd learned to watch for, the slight confusion in Mrs. Patterson's eyes, the way she gripped her walker more tightly, the careful way she moved as if she wasn't sure of her balance. Why don't you sit down and let Sophie and me take care of breakfast? Beth suggested gently. I hate being useless, Mrs. Patterson said with unusual sharpness. You're not useless, Sophie said immediately. You're having a hard day. Everyone has hard days. Sophie's right, Beth added. You take care of us in so many ways. You listen to our worries. You share your wisdom. You make this place feel like home. That's not useless, that's essential. Mrs. Patterson's eyes filled with tears. I remember being strong and independent. It's hard to accept that I need help now. It's hard for me too sometimes, Beth said honestly. I used to take care of my mom, and then suddenly I couldn't even take care of myself. It made me feel like a failure. But needing help doesn't make you a failure, Sophie said, moving to stand between them. It just makes you human. And humans are supposed to help each other. That's what families do. Later that day, when Mrs. Patterson was napping and Sophie was coloring at the kitchen table, Beth reflected on how much they'd all grown in just a few weeks. They were learning to be vulnerable with each other, to ask for help when they needed it, and to offer help without judgment. Frank had noticed the change too. You seem more settled, he'd said the day before. More like yourself. Beth realized he was right. For the first time since her mother's death, she felt like she was becoming herself again, not the scared, desperate woman who'd been sleeping on the streets, but the person her mother had raised her to be, someone who chose kindness, who saw possibilities instead of just problems, who believed in the power of ordinary people to create extraordinary love. That evening, as they settled into their usual routine of homework help and dinner preparation, Sophie made an announcement. I've been thinking about what I want to be when I grow up, she said seriously. Oh, what's that? Mrs. Patterson asked. I want to help families like ours. Families that aren't regular, but are perfect anyway. Maybe I'll be a social worker like Linda, or maybe I'll start a place where people who need each other can find each other. That sounds like a wonderful dream, Beth said. It's not just a dream, Sophie replied confidently. Dreams are things that might happen. This is something that will happen, because I've seen how much good it does. You and Mrs. Patterson taught me that. As Beth looked around their small kitchen, at Mrs. Patterson carefully sorting her evening medications, at Sophie bent over her math homework with her tongue poking out in concentration, at the drawings on the refrigerator and the grocery list in 3 different handwritings, she knew Sophie was right. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were thriving. And they were doing it together. Linda Thompson arrived for her monthly visit on a crisp October morning, but this time she wasn't alone. A woman in her 50s with silver hair and a serious expression accompanied her up the stairs to Mrs. Patterson's apartment. This is my supervisor, Carol Jensen, Linda explained as they settled in the living room. She wanted to meet everyone and see how the arrangement is working firsthand. Beth felt a flutter of anxiety. Supervisor visits usually meant scrutiny, and she'd grown protective of their little family's happiness. Carol Jensen had kind eyes but a no-nonsense demeanor. She spent several minutes observing Sophie, who was cheerfully showing off her latest school art project, a family portrait that featured 3 stick figures holding hands in front of a house with an oversized garden. Tell me about your picture, Sophie, Carol said. That's Mrs. Patterson, and that's Beth, and that's me, Sophie explained proudly. We're in front of our apartment, but I drew the garden we're going to plant in the spring. Mrs. Patterson knows all about flowers, and Beth is going to help us build raised beds so Mrs. Patterson doesn't have to bend over. It looks like you're all very happy, Carol observed. We are, Sophie said simply. This is the best home I've ever had. Carol turned to Mrs. Patterson. Margaret, how has having Beth here affected your daily life? Mrs. Patterson, who was having one of her sharper days, smiled warmly. It's given me my purpose back. I was starting to feel like such a burden, to Sophie, to the system, to everyone. But with Beth here, I can contribute to our family instead of just being someone who needs care. Can you give me an example? Well, I may not be able to cook full meals anymore, but I can still teach Sophie how to measure ingredients and tell stories while we bake cookies. Beth handles the oven and the heavy lifting, but I provide the knowledge and the company. Sophie gets to learn, I get to feel useful, and Beth gets to see how much joy there is in simple traditions. Carol made notes. And Beth, how has this arrangement affected your stability? It's given me everything I needed, Beth replied honestly. Not just housing, but purpose and family. I have a job I love at the diner, a child who teaches me something new every day, and a wise woman who's become like a mother to me. I understand you've been exploring educational opportunities. Beth nodded. Helen Murphy, one of our regular customers at the diner, connected me with the substitute teacher coordinator for the district. I've been taking the required training courses online in the evenings. Once I complete them, I'll be able to work as a substitute teacher while keeping my diner hours. That's ambitious. How do you balance everything? We all contribute, Sophie interjected. I help Mrs. Patterson remember her medicines, and I can make simple snacks now. Mrs. Patterson helps me with my homework and reads to me. Beth does the hard stuff like shopping and cleaning, but she taught me and Mrs. Patterson how to help too. Carol spent the next hour observing their interactions more closely. She watched Sophie help Mrs. Patterson organize her pill dispenser, noting how the child was gentle but not overly protective. She observed Beth guiding Mrs. Patterson through some light exercises the physical therapist had recommended, seeing how Beth maintained Mrs. Patterson's dignity while ensuring her safety. During lunch, Carol saw how naturally they functioned as a family unit. Sophie chatted about her school day, Mrs. Patterson shared wisdom about handling friendship conflicts, and Beth listened to both while making sure everyone had enough to eat. Sophie, Carol said as they finished eating, can you tell me about a typical day here? Sure. Beth wakes me up at 7, and we have breakfast together while Mrs. Patterson takes her morning medicines. Then Beth walks me to school, and Mrs. Patterson does her plant care and reads. After school, Beth picks me up and we come home. Sometimes Mrs. Patterson needs help with things, so we all work together. Then I do homework while Beth makes dinner, and Mrs. Patterson helps me with the hard parts. What about evenings? That's family time. We watch shows together, or play games, or sometimes Beth reads to me while Mrs. Patterson works on her crossword puzzles. On weekends, we go to the diner for lunch, and we visit the library, and we do laundry at the laundromat down the street. Do you ever feel like you have too much responsibility for taking care of Mrs. Patterson? Sophie considered this seriously. I don't think it's taking care of her. It's more like, we're a team. Like when we make cookies, I can't reach the high shelf and Mrs. Patterson can't lift the heavy bowl, but together we can make the best cookies ever. Carol turned to Linda. What do Sophie's school reports show? Linda pulled out a folder. Significant improvement across all areas. Her teacher notes that she's more focused, more confident, and shows better emotional regulation. Her test scores have improved, and she's made several friends. No behavioral incidents since the placement began. And Mrs. Patterson's medical evaluations. Stable and improving in some areas. Having consistent help with medication management has reduced her confusion episodes. Her doctor notes that she seems less anxious and more engaged with life. Carol was quiet for several minutes, reviewing her notes. Finally, she looked up at all three of them. This is highly unusual, she began, and Beth's heart sank. Typically, we see decline in complex arrangements like this over time. The stress of multiple people with different needs living together usually creates problems, not solutions. Sophie's face fell. Are you going to make me leave? On the contrary, Carol said with a small smile. This is one of the most successful placements I've seen in 20 years of social work. Sophie is thriving, Mrs. Patterson has gained stability, and Beth has found not just housing but a purpose that clearly fulfills her. Relief flooded through Beth. So we can stay together. I'm recommending that this arrangement be made permanent, Carol said. Linda, I want you to begin the paperwork for Beth to become Sophie's legal guardian, with Mrs. Patterson as a supportive family member. Sophie's eyes went wide. Really? Beth could adopt me? It's a process, Linda explained, but yes, that's what we're proposing. Beth would need to complete additional training and go through formal evaluation, but based on what I've observed, I believe it would be in everyone's best interest. What does that mean exactly? Mrs. Patterson asked. It means Sophie would legally be Beth's daughter, Carol explained. You'd still be an important part of their family, but Beth would have the authority to make educational and medical decisions for Sophie. Sophie looked at Beth with shining eyes. Would you want to be my real mom? Beth knelt down to Sophie's level. Sweetheart, I already feel like your mom in my heart. Making it official would just be paperwork catching up with what we already know. And I'd still be your family too, wouldn't I, Mrs. Patterson? Sophie asked anxiously. Forever and always, Mrs. Patterson said firmly. Some families are built by choice, not just by birth. We've chosen each other. After Carol and Linda left, the three of them sat quietly for a moment, processing the magnitude of what had just happened. A real adoption, Sophie whispered. I'm going to have a real mom. You've always been real to us, Beth said. This just makes it official. That evening, they called Frank at the diner to share their news. He insisted on sending home a celebration cake, and they invited Helen Murphy to join them for dessert since she'd been instrumental in helping Beth find her footing in the community. This calls for a toast, Helen declared, raising her coffee cup. To families that are built on love, not just biology. To second chances, Mrs. Patterson added. To finding each other when we needed each other most, Beth contributed. To forever, Sophie said solemnly. As they clinked their mismatched cups together, Beth thought about her mother's promise that everything would work out okay. She'd been right, but not in any way Beth could have imagined. Sometimes the best outcomes came from the most unexpected places, and sometimes the people who saved you were the ones you thought you were saving. Can you imagine being chosen by someone the way Sophie chose Beth? Share your thoughts about what makes a family real, and subscribe to see how their adoption journey unfolds. The paperwork might take months, but in their hearts, they were already a forever family. The adoption paperwork was more complex than anyone had anticipated. Beth sat across from James Mitchell, the semi-retired lawyer she'd met at the diner, as he explained the challenges they were facing. The good news is that Linda Thompson and Carol Jensen's recommendations carry significant weight, James said, reviewing the documents spread across his desk. The concerning part is your recent homelessness and lack of traditional financial stability. But I have a job now, Beth protested, and Sophie is clearly thriving with us. I know, and that's exactly what we need to emphasize. But the court will want to see long-term stability, not just a few months of success. James leaned back in his chair. They'll want evidence that you can provide for Sophie financially throughout her childhood, including college planning and emergency situations. Mrs. Patterson, who had insisted on coming to the meeting despite the difficult walk up to James's office, spoke up. What kind of evidence do they need? Steady employment for at least a year, adequate savings, health insurance, a stable living situation. Beth meets some of these requirements, but not all. Beth felt her heart sinking. So what does that mean? We wait a year and hope nothing changes. Not necessarily. There are steps we can take to strengthen your case. James pulled out a legal pad. First, we document every aspect of Sophie's improvement since she's been with you. School records, medical records, testimonials from teachers and community members. How many testimonials do we need? Mrs. Patterson asked. As many as we can get from credible sources. Teachers, doctors, neighbors, employers, church members if you attend services. People who can speak to Sophie's well-being and your fitness as a parent. Over the following weeks, their little family was amazed by the outpouring of support from their community. Sophie's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, no relation to Frank, wrote a detailed letter describing the positive changes she'd seen in Sophie's behavior and academic performance. Sophie has transformed from a quiet, withdrawn child to one of my most engaged students, she wrote. She participates actively in class, has developed strong friendships, and shows remarkable emotional maturity. When I asked her to write about her family for our recent assignment, her essay was filled with joy and gratitude. She clearly feels secure and loved. Dr. Amanda Clark, who had become Mrs. Patterson's primary physician and had met Beth during several appointments, provided a medical perspective. The stability Beth provides has significantly improved Mrs. Patterson's health outcomes. More importantly, I've observed Beth's natural instincts with Sophie during visits. She's attentive, nurturing, and advocates appropriately for the child's needs. The diner customers rallied around them as well. Helen Murphy organized a letter-writing campaign, and soon James's office was flooded with testimonials from people who had witnessed their family's dynamics firsthand. Frank Rodriguez wrote, In 30 years of running this diner, I've learned to read people quickly. Beth Williams is one of the most genuine, hard-working people I've ever employed. More importantly, the love between her and Sophie is unmistakable. When Sophie comes in after school, her face lights up when she sees Beth. That's not something you can fake. Even customers who barely knew them personally felt compelled to write. Tom Bradley, the handyman who had checked their apartment for safety issues, wrote, "I've been in many homes over the years, and you can feel the difference between a house and a home." Immediately, Beth, Sophie, and Mrs. Patterson have created something special, a place where everyone is valued and cared for. The most powerful testimony came from an unexpected source. Sophie's previous foster mother, Mrs. Johnson, reached out to Linda Thompson after hearing about the adoption proceedings. "I need to be honest," she told Linda during a phone call that Linda later relayed to Beth. "We weren't the right fit for Sophie, but I could see she was a special child who needed the right kind of stability. When I heard she was with Beth and Mrs. Patterson, I was curious, so I drove by the diner where Beth works." "What did you see?" Linda asked. "I saw Sophie doing homework at a corner table after school, with Beth checking on her between customers and the older woman helping with reading. Sophie was animated and happy in a way I never saw during the 4 months she lived with us. That child has found her home." Despite the community support, there were still practical hurdles. Beth's income from the diner, while steady, was modest. James explained that the court would want to see financial projections and planning for Sophie's future needs. "Have you considered the substitute teaching opportunity?" he asked. "Additional income from education work would strengthen your financial position significantly." Beth had completed her training courses and was on the substitute list, but opportunities had been limited. That changed when Helen Murphy made a few strategic phone calls to former colleagues. "There's an opening for a long-term substitute position at Riverside Elementary," Helen told Beth over coffee at the diner. "The third-grade teacher is taking maternity leave after Christmas. It's a 4-month position that could lead to permanent employment." "Third grade," Beth mused. "That's right around Sophie's age group." "The principal is aware of your situation. She's impressed by your qualifications and the community support you've received. She wants to meet with you next week." The interview went better than Beth had dared hope. Principal Martinez was a warm, practical woman who had heard about Beth's story from Helen. "I believe in teachers who understand what children really need," she said. "Your experience with Sophie and the commitment you've shown to your unconventional family tells me you have exactly the kind of heart our students need." "I'd be honored to work here," Beth replied. "Teaching has always been my dream, and now I understand why. It's about helping children feel safe and valued so they can learn and grow." The position starts in January. It would give you 4 months to prove yourself, and if it goes well, there's a strong possibility of a permanent position opening up for next fall. When Beth shared the news at home, Sophie was thrilled. "You're going to be a teacher. Maybe you'll even teach some of my friends when they get to 3rd grade." Mrs. Patterson was equally pleased. "This is exactly what your mother would have wanted for you, dear. Using your gifts to help children while providing stability for your own daughter." The word daughter still sent a warm thrill through Beth every time she heard it. While the legal adoption process continued to move slowly through the courts, everyone had begun thinking of their family in those terms. James called with an update in late November. "The court date is set for February 15th. We've submitted all the documentation, and the judge has agreed to expedite the process given Sophie's stability in your care and the strong community support." "What happens at the court date?" Sophie asked when Beth shared the news. "The judge will ask us questions about our family and our plans for the future. Then she'll decide whether to approve the adoption." "What if she says no?" Beth knelt down to Sophie's level. "Then we'll keep trying until we find a way to make it official. But no matter what any paperwork says, you're my daughter and I'm your mom. That's not changing." Sophie threw her arms around Beth's neck. "I'm not scared anymore. We're already a real family, even if the judge doesn't know it yet." That evening, as they prepared dinner together, Mrs. Patterson made an announcement that surprised them both. "I've been thinking about what I can do to help with the adoption," she said carefully. "I want to add your names to my will and my bank accounts." "Mrs. Patterson, that's not necessary," Beth began. Yes, it is. If something happens to me, I want Sophie to have the security of my savings for college, and I want you to have the security of this apartment. It's paid for, Beth. Has been for 15 years. If you're listed as a beneficiary, the court will see that Sophie has long-term housing stability. Beth was speechless. Mrs. Patterson was essentially leaving them her entire estate. Modest though it was, it represented security beyond anything Beth had dared imagine. Why would you do that? Beth asked quietly. Because you're my family, Mrs. Patterson said simply. Harold and I never had children of our own, but God gave me both of you when I needed you most. This is what family does. They take care of each other. As they sat down to dinner that night, Beth looked around the table at her chosen family and marveled at how love had multiplied rather than divided their resources. Sophie was getting the mother she'd always needed. Mrs. Patterson had regained a sense of purpose, and Beth had found her way back to the person her own mother had raised her to be. The legal hurdles were real, but so was the love that bound them together. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as a family. December arrived with an early winter storm that blanketed Portland in 6 inches of snow. Beth was working the breakfast shift at the diner when her phone rang at 11:30. Sophie's name appeared on the screen, which immediately sent alarm bells through her mind. Sophie should have been in school. Beth. Sophie's voice was shaky and scared. Something's wrong with Mrs. Patterson. She's on the floor, and she can't get up, and she's talking funny. Beth's blood went cold. Sophie, I'm calling 911 right now. Stay with Mrs. Patterson, but don't try to move her. I'm coming home. Frank looked up from the grill as Beth hung up. What's wrong? Medical emergency at home. I have to go. Go, Frank said immediately. We'll cover your shift. Keep us posted. Beth ran the 6 blocks home through the snow, her heart pounding with every step. She arrived to find paramedics already loading Mrs. Patterson onto a stretcher. Sophie stood in the doorway, wearing her school clothes, tears streaming down her face. Is she going to die? Sophie asked as Beth swept her into her arms. I don't know, sweetheart. But she's getting help now. Beth turned to the lead paramedic. What happened? Appears to be a stroke, the paramedic explained. The little girl did exactly the right thing, calling 911 immediately. We're taking her to Portland General. Can I ride with her? Beth asked. Family only in the ambulance, but you can follow us there. She is family, Sophie said firmly. We're her family, and she's ours. The paramedic looked at Beth, who nodded. She's right. We'll live together, and I help coordinate her care. All right, one of you can ride along. Beth looked at Sophie. You should stay with her. She'll be scared, and seeing you will help. What about you? I'll follow in a taxi and meet you at the hospital. At Portland General, they were directed to the emergency department waiting area. Sophie curled up in a plastic chair beside Beth, still wearing her winter coat and mittens. Tell me what happened this morning, Beth said gently. Mrs. Patterson was acting weird at breakfast. She kept forgetting words, like she'd start to say something and then stop. I thought maybe she was just tired. Sophie wiped her nose with her mitten. Then when I was getting ready for school, I heard a loud noise from the kitchen. She was on the floor by the sink, and when I asked if she was okay, she couldn't talk right. The words were all mixed up. You did exactly the right thing calling 911, Sophie. You might have saved her life. But what if she doesn't get better? What if she can't live with us anymore? Beth pulled Sophie closer. Let's take this one step at a time. First, we find out what the doctors say. Then we figure out what comes next. Dr. Sarakim, the attending urologist, emerged after 2 hours with an update. Mrs. Patterson has had what we call a minor stroke. She's stable now, but she'll need to stay in the hospital for several days for monitoring and evaluation. Will she be okay? Sophie asked anxiously. She's going to need rehabilitation therapy, and there may be some lasting effects. Her speech is affected right now, and she has some weakness on her left side. But many stroke patients make significant recoveries, especially when they have strong support systems. Can we see her? Beth asked. For a few minutes. She's awake but groggy from the medications. Mrs. Patterson looked small and fragile in the hospital bed, connected to various monitors and phone lines. Her smile was lopsided when she saw them, and her speech was slurred but understandable. "My girls," she managed to say. "Sophie, you called for help." "I did just like you taught me about emergencies," Sophie said, taking Mrs. Patterson's right hand carefully. "I stayed calm and gave them all the information." "Good girl." Mrs. Patterson's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, scared you." "You don't have to be sorry," Beth said. "We're just glad you're okay." Over the following days, Beth and Sophie developed a new routine around hospital visits. Beth would work the early shift at the diner, pick up Sophie from school, and they'd spend the evening at the hospital. Frank had been incredibly understanding, adjusting Beth's schedule to accommodate the crisis. "Family comes first," he told her firmly. "The diner will survive. You take care of what matters." Helen Murphy and other regular customers pitched in as well. Helen offered to pick up Sophie from school when Beth couldn't leave work, and Tom Bradley checked on their apartment daily to make sure everything was secure. By the third day, Mrs. Patterson was more alert and able to communicate better, though her speech remained slow and sometimes slurred. The occupational therapist was optimistic about her recovery potential. "The next few weeks will be crucial," explained therapist Jennifer Walsh. "Mrs. Patterson will need intensive rehabilitation, and then we'll need to assess whether she can safely return to independent living." "What does that mean?" Sophie asked. "It means we'll evaluate how well she can manage daily activities like cooking, bathing, and taking medications. She may need additional support at home." Beth had been dreading this conversation, but she knew it had to be addressed. "If she needs more care than I can provide while working and taking care of Sophie, what are our options?" "There are several possibilities. In-home health services, assisted living facilities, or family members who can provide more intensive support." That evening, after Sophie had fallen asleep in the hospital chair, Beth and Mrs. Patterson had a difficult conversation. "I don't want to be a burden," Mrs. Patterson said quietly, her words coming slowly but clearly. "If I can't contribute to our family anymore, maybe it's time." "Time for what?" Beth asked gently. "For you and Sophie, to have your own life, without an old woman who needs constant care." Beth moved her chair closer to the bed. "Mrs. Patterson, do you remember what you told me the night we met? You said good people don't give up on each other." Mrs. Patterson's eyes filled with tears. "You didn't give up on Sophie when caring for her became challenging. You didn't give up on me when I had nothing to offer but another mouth to feed. What makes you think we'd give up on you now? But it's different. I might not get better. I might need help with everything. Then we'll help you with everything. That's what families do." The adoption. This will complicate things. Courts don't want disabled people around children. Beth had been worried about the same thing, but she'd already made her decision. "If the court can't see that you're an essential part of our family, regardless of what challenges you're facing, then they don't understand what family means." The next morning, Sophie arrived at the hospital with a hand-drawn card covered in flower stickers. "I made this for you, Mrs. Patterson. It says get well soon, and we love you, and come home soon." Mrs. Patterson studied the card carefully with her good hand. "Sophie, what if I come home different? What if I can't help you with homework or bake cookies?" Sophie climbed carefully onto the bed beside her. "Mrs. Patterson, do you love me the same amount as before?" "Of course." "Do you still want to live with me and Beth?" "More than anything." "Then nothing important has changed. You're still my Mrs. Patterson, and I'm still your Sophie. If you need help with things, that's okay. I needed help with lots of things when I first came to live with you, and you didn't stop loving me." As Beth watched this exchange, she realized that Sophie was teaching them all something profound about unconditional love. The 8-year-old understood better than most adults that love isn't based on what someone can do for you, but on who they are to you. A week later, Mrs. Patterson was discharged to a rehabilitation facility for intensive therapy. The plan was for her to spend 3 weeks there, working with physical therapists, occupational therapists, and speech therapists to regain as much function as possible. "Then we evaluate her readiness to return home," explained the discharge planner. "Given her living situation with you and Sophie, we'll also assess what additional support services might be needed." As they prepared to leave the hospital, Mrs. Patterson gripped Beth's hand with her stronger right hand. "Thank you for not giving up on me." "Thank you for teaching us that family isn't about being perfect," Beth replied. "It's about choosing to love each other through the imperfect times." The road ahead would be challenging, but they'd already proven they could handle challenges together. Whatever Mrs. Patterson's recovery brought, they would face it as a family. February 15th arrived gray and cold, but Beth woke up feeling cautiously optimistic. Mrs. Patterson had been home from rehabilitation for 3 weeks, and while she still moved slowly and sometimes struggled with words, she was regaining strength daily. More importantly, she'd adapted to her limitations with grace and humor. "Today's the day," Sophie announced at breakfast, wearing her best dress, a blue one with small flowers that Helen Murphy had bought specially for the court hearing. "Today's the day," Beth agreed, trying to keep the nervousness out of her voice. Mrs. Patterson, who was managing her breakfast with determination despite her left hand's continued weakness, looked up with a smile. "I've been practicing what I'll say if the judge asks me questions." "Just speak from your heart," Beth advised. "That's all any of us can do." James Mitchell had prepared them thoroughly for what to expect. The hearing would be formal but not adversarial, since no one was contesting the adoption. The judge would review the extensive documentation they'd submitted, ask questions of all parties, and then make her decision. Judge Rebecca Martinez, no relation to Sophie's principal, has a reputation for being thorough but fair, James had explained. She's particularly focused on the best interests of the child. They arrived at the courthouse an hour early, partly from nerves and partly because Mrs. Patterson needed extra time to navigate the building with her walker. Linda Thompson met them in the hallway, carrying a thick folder of documentation. "How are you feeling, Sophie?" Linda asked. "Nervous but excited," Sophie replied honestly. "Like when you're about to go on a really big roller coaster." "That's a good way to put it," Linda smiled. "Remember, you can tell the judge exactly how you feel. She wants to hear from you." When their case was called, they entered a smaller courtroom than Beth had expected. Judge Martinez, a woman in her 50s with kind but serious eyes, sat behind an imposing wooden desk. A court reporter sat nearby, and James took his place at a table with Beth and Sophie. "This is case number 2025 AD 4721, the petition of Elizabeth Williams to adopt Sophie Carter," Judge Martinez began. "I've reviewed all the submitted documentation, and I have several questions for the parties involved." Beth's heart pounded as the judge first addressed Linda Thompson, asking her to summarize Sophie's case history and her recommendation for the adoption. "Sophie has been in foster care for 4 years," Linda explained. "She's lived in 7 different placements before being placed with Mrs. Patterson 8 months ago. Since Beth Williams joined the household, Sophie has shown remarkable improvement in all areas: academic, emotional, and social." "What makes this placement different from the previous ones?" the judge asked. "Several factors. First, Sophie had input in creating this family structure. She wasn't simply placed somewhere and expected to adapt. Second, all 3 household members contribute to the family's functioning according to their abilities. Third, there's a community support system that has rallied around them." Judge Martinez turned to Mrs. Patterson. "Mrs. Patterson, please tell me about your role in this proposed family." Mrs. Patterson gripped her walker and spoke carefully but clearly. "Your Honor, I may not be able to do as much as I used to, but I love Sophie like my own granddaughter. Beth has become like a daughter to me. We take care of each other. Are you concerned about your health affecting Sophie's stability?" "I was worried about that after my stroke. But Sophie and Beth showed me that love doesn't require perfect health, just commitment to each other." The judge made notes and then addressed Beth. "Ms. Williams, you've experienced significant upheaval in your life over the past year. How do I know this arrangement will provide Sophie with the stability she needs?" Beth took a deep breath. "Your Honor, you're right that I faced challenges. But those challenges taught me what really matters. Sophie needs to know she's chosen and valued, not just accommodated. She needs to see that families work through difficulties together rather than giving up on each other. Explain your financial plan for providing for Sophie." I have steady employment at Riverside Diner and will be starting a long-term substitute teaching position next month that could lead to permanent employment. Mrs. Patterson has generously included Sophie and me in her estate planning, which provides long-term security. More importantly, our community has shown us that support comes in many forms beyond just financial. Judge Martinez reviewed her notes. Sophie, I understand you wanted to speak to me directly. Sophie stood up carefully, having practiced this moment. Yes, Your Honor. I want to tell you about my family. Please go ahead. I used to think I was broken because no families wanted to keep me. But Beth and Mrs. Patterson taught me that I wasn't broken, I just hadn't found the right people yet. Sophie's voice grew stronger as she continued. When I lived with other families, I always felt like I was trying out for something, like they were deciding if I was good enough to stay. And how is this different? With Beth and Mrs. Patterson, I never have to worry about that. When Mrs. Patterson got sick, I was scared they'd send me somewhere else because sick people can't take care of kids. But Beth said we take care of each other, period. That's when I knew this was my real family. The judge leaned forward slightly. What does having a real family mean to you, Sophie? It means when I mess up, they help me do better instead of giving up on me. It means when they are having hard times, I can help them too. It means I don't have to pack my suitcase anymore, because this is where I belong. Judge Martinez was quiet for several minutes, reviewing documents and making notes. Finally, she looked up. I've been a family court judge for 15 years, and I've seen many traditional family structures that provide less stability and love than what's being documented here. She paused. Sophie, your improvement in school, your emotional growth, and your clear attachment to both Ms. Williams and Mrs. Patterson demonstrate that this unconventional family is meeting your needs exceptionally well. Beth held her breath. Ms. Williams, your commitment to this child and to Mrs. Patterson, your employment stability, and the remarkable community support you've gathered all indicate that you're prepared to be Sophie's parent through whatever challenges life brings. The judge looked directly at Sophie. Young lady, your wisdom about what makes a family real shows me that you've found exactly what you need. Judge Martinez picked up her gavel. Therefore, I hereby grant the petition for adoption. Elizabeth Williams, you are now Sophie's legal mother, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. Congratulations to all of you. The courtroom erupted in quiet celebration. Sophie launched herself into Beth's arms, tears of joy streaming down both their faces. Mrs. Patterson wiped her eyes with her good hand while James shook hands with Linda. It's official, Sophie whispered. You're my real mom now. I've been your real mom since the day we met at that bus stop, Beth whispered back. This just makes it official. Outside the courthouse, they found an unexpected gathering. Frank had closed the diner for an hour and brought several regular customers to celebrate. Helen Murphy was there with a bouquet of flowers. Tom Bradley had a congratulatory banner. And even Dr. Clark had taken time from her practice to attend. We couldn't let this moment pass without marking it properly, Frank explained. You three have become family to all of us. As they stood on the courthouse steps, surrounded by their chosen community, Beth marveled at how much their lives had changed since that rainy night at the bus stop. Sophie was right. They'd found each other exactly when they all needed it most. What do we do now? Sophie asked as they prepared to head home. Now we'll live happily ever after, Mrs. Patterson said with a smile. Do you really believe in happily ever after? Sophie asked. Beth looked around at their gathered friends and family, at the adoption papers in her hand, at the little girl who had changed everything by asking for exactly what she needed. I believe in happily ever after that we create ourselves, one day at a time, by choosing to love each other. And as they headed home together, officially and forever a family, Beth knew her mother would have been proud of the life they'd built from love, hope, and the courage to ask strangers for help. 6 months later, on a warm August evening, Beth stood in the backyard of their apartment building, watching Sophie teach Mrs. Patterson how to use the new raised garden beds they'd installed in the spring. The vegetables were thriving, and Sophie's face was smudged with dough as she carefully watered the tomato plants. Remember, Mrs. Patterson, the tomatoes need water every day but not too much, Sophie instructed patiently, her own gardening skills having improved dramatically under Mrs. Patterson's guidance. I remember, dear, Mrs. Patterson replied, her speech now almost completely normal after months of therapy. Though I might need you to remind me on my forgetful days. Beth smiled as she finished hanging laundry on the line, a chore they'd all learned to enjoy as family time. Their life had settled into rhythms that felt both peaceful and purposeful. The substitute teaching position had led to exactly what Helen Murphy had predicted, a permanent contract to teach third grade at Riverside Elementary starting in the fall. Beth would be teaching just 2 grades below Sophie, who had flourished in school and was already reading at a 5th grade level. Mom, Sophie called. She'd started using the word naturally about a month after the adoption was finalized. Mrs. Patterson says we have enough cherry tomatoes for a salad tonight. The word mom still sent a warm flutter through Beth's chest every time she heard it. Sophie had tested the word carefully for weeks after the adoption, as if making sure it was really okay to use. Now it rolled off her tongue as naturally as breathing. Perfect timing, Beth replied. Frank is bringing dinner by in an hour. Frank's weekly dinner visits had become a cherished tradition. He'd arrive with food from the diner, they'd eat together in the backyard, and he'd catch up on Sophie's latest achievements and Mrs. Patterson's recovery progress. He'd become like an uncle to Sophie, and had even started teaching her basic cooking skills during slow afternoons at the diner. Is Dr. Mitchell coming too? Sophie asked hopefully. Yes, he'll be here, Beth laughed. James Mitchell had also become a regular family friend, often joining their Sunday dinners and serving as an informal grandfather figure to Sophie. As the sun began to set, their small backyard filled with the people who had become their extended family. Frank arrived with containers of Sophie's favorite pasta and Mrs. Patterson's preferred soup. James brought flowers from his own garden. Helen Murphy appeared with a fresh apple pie, and Tom Bradley stopped by with a small wooden stool he'd made for Sophie to use in the garden. This is what happiness looks like, Mrs. Patterson observed as they gathered around the picnic table Tom had built for them in the spring. Tell us about your first week of teacher training, Beth, Helen encouraged as they began eating. It's everything I dreamed it would be, Beth replied. I keep thinking about how my mom always said I'd make a good teacher, but I never thought I'd get the chance. Sometimes the best paths are the ones we never could have planned. Speaking of paths, James said with a twinkle in his eye, Sophie, tell everyone about your letter to the mayor. Sophie blushed but sat up straighter. I wrote to Mayor Watson about how our city needs more programs to help families like ours find each other. Families that don't look regular but work really well together. What kind of programs? Frank asked, genuinely interested. Like maybe places where people who need help can meet people who want to help, but not in a scary way. And maybe classes about how different kinds of families can work, not just the mom and dad kind. Mrs. Patterson patted Sophie's hand. She got a response letter from the mayor's office asking for more details about her ideas. Really? Beth was amazed. Sophie, you didn't tell me that part. I wanted it to be a surprise. The lady from the mayor's office wants to meet with us next month to talk about my ideas. As the evening continued, Beth found herself observing the gathering with deep contentment. Mrs. Patterson, while still moving more slowly than before her stroke, was engaged and laughing. Sophie was confident and articulate, showing none of the anxiety that had marked her early months with them. Their friends treated them as a complete family unit, never questioning the unconventional nature of their structure. I have an announcement, Mrs. Patterson said as they were finishing dessert. I've been thinking about Harold's life insurance money that I never touched. I want to set up college funds for Sophie and any other children Beth might want to adopt in the future. Mrs. Patterson, that's incredibly generous, but, Beth began. No buts, Mrs. Patterson said firmly. Harold always said money should be used to build futures, not gather dust. Sophie gave me my purpose back, and you gave me my family. This is how I want to honor that. Sophie's eyes widened. Does that mean we might adopt more kids? Beth looked around the table at their supportive community. Would you like that? Yes. There are other kids like me who need families that understand them. We could help them find their people too. As their friends began to leave that evening, each offering hugs and promises to see them soon, Beth realized that their little family had become something even larger, a model for what community could look like when people chose to care for each other. Later, as she tucked Sophie into bed, her daughter had questions about the future. Mom, Do you think we'll always be this happy? Beth considered the question carefully. I think we'll have hard times like everyone does. But I think we'll face them together, and that will make us happy in the deepest way. What's the deepest way? The kind of happiness that comes from knowing you're loved no matter what happens. Sophie nodded thoughtfully. Like how I knew you loved me even when Mrs. Patterson was sick and everything was scary. Exactly like that. And like how Mrs. Patterson loves us even though she needs help with things now. Yes, sweetheart. I think that's the best kind of love. The kind that doesn't go away when things get hard. After Sophie fell asleep, Beth and Mrs. Patterson sat on the front porch, enjoying the cool evening air and the satisfaction of a day well lived. Do you ever think about that night at the bus stop? Mrs. Patterson asked. Every day, Beth replied. I was so lost then. I thought my life was over. I was lost too, in a different way. I thought my useful life was over, that I'd become nothing but a burden. And Sophie was lost in the foster system, convinced she was somehow broken. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching neighbors walk by and call out friendly greetings. It's funny, Mrs. Patterson mused, how the worst night of your life can turn out to be the beginning of the best part. Sophie says that sometimes God puts people exactly where they need to be, exactly when they need to be there. That child is wise beyond her years. Beth looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. I think about my mom a lot. I think she'd be amazed by how everything worked out. I think she'd be proud of the woman you became through the hard times, not despite them. As they prepared to go inside, Beth reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. A year ago, she'd been sleeping on a bench, convinced she'd lost everything that mattered. Tonight, she was a mother, a teacher, a daughter to Mrs. Patterson, and a beloved member of a community that had embraced their unconventional family. The adoption certificate hanging in their hallway was official confirmation of what they'd known from the beginning. Families are built by choice, sustained by commitment, and strengthened by the courage to ask for help when you need it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new joys. Sophie would continue growing into the remarkable young woman she was becoming. Mrs. Patterson would continue healing and sharing her wisdom. Beth would begin her teaching career and possibly expand their family further. But tonight, they were complete. Three people who had found each other in their greatest need and created something beautiful together. A home built on love, hope, and the radical belief that everyone deserves to belong somewhere. As Beth turned off the porch light and locked the door, she whispered a thank you to her mother, to the universe, and to the extraordinary little girl who had changed everything by simply asking for what she needed most. Sometimes the most profound transformations begin with the smallest acts of courage. And sometimes, when you're brave enough to reach out to a stranger, you discover they're not a stranger at all. They're family you just haven't met yet. Their story was still being written, one ordinary, extraordinary day at a time. Have you ever wondered what would happen if you had the courage to ask for exactly what you need? Share your thoughts and subscribe to discover more stories about the unexpected families we create when we choose love over fear.